My name is CCP FoxFour. This presentation is for primarily third-party devs to give you guys a bit of an update over what we at CCP have done over the last year and sort of what's coming up real soon. I'll give you a bit of a heads up. I've been sick the last sort of week, so I was actually considering canceling this presentation because I haven't really done much on it. It's primarily just slides with headers, and I'll make this up as I go. But I figured even if I ramble for a bit, there might be something useful in there that you guys want, so I'll do this anyways. So apologies in advance if this is pretty terrible. Again, my name is CCP FoxFour. I'm a technical designer at CCP. I've been with CCP since June of 2012, and before joining CCP, I did what you guys do, make stuff for Eve using our APIs and the SDE and that kind of stuff. So first up, the image export collection. I mean, it contains more now than it did last year. We're growing it. We have a new system in place where we can easily whitelist stuff, resources from the client to be added to the image export. So if there's images in the client that you want added that are not currently in the image export, let us know, and we'll see about adding them. It's fairly easy at this point for us to do. We just need to know what you want. The static data export. Since last year, hasn't really changed much. We've added the dogma expressions table to the SDE, which people were complaining was missing. So that's been added. The blueprint stuff has been added. The skin stuff, the information for the upcoming skins will all be in there. Things like that. Other than that, again, it hasn't really changed much. We haven't focused on it other than trying to keep adding information to it as we add it to the client. If there is something missing from it, please let me know. We'd really like to kill the client-side cache, and I know there's a few people who still use it. I'd like to know what you're using it for, and if it's something we can get in the SDE, I'd very much like to do that. The Webgl project, I'm not sure if many of you noticed, but it was updated recently, and it works. It works wonderfully well. There's a guy at CCP on our engine team that updated it, made T-Amber, or however you say his name, incredibly happy, the guy who runs Caldari Prime Pony Club. So that's been updated, and it's on GitHub, and we're monitoring the pull requests. The guy at CCP who updated it isn't really used to Git and GitHub, so be nice to him if he doesn't quite get things right. But he is more than willing to take a look at any pull requests or issues you post on that project, and is excited to work with you on it. And like that's a big contrast to last year where we said like it was kind of dead. So. Yay. The SSO, as you guys may have noticed yesterday, we announced two-factor authentication using the Google Authenticator. That will make its way into the SSO. So I know there's been a lot of concerns about people using the SSO. I don't know, I'm going through this third-party site. I don't want to give them my username and password. Hopefully this helps ease some of those fears, the two-factor auth making it over that way. And because I know some people aren't really aware, the SSO is open for everyone to use. If you just go to developers.eveonline.com, you can sign up and start using the SSO right now. The XML API, we have continued to update it. We've added a few new things to it. The cores headers have been added to it. The contacts page was updated to include the watch list information. We added a blueprints endpoint to it, so you get all your blueprint information. Things like that, that was all added. At this point, though, and I'll get into why, we're primarily switching the XML API over to a maintenance mode, so you probably won't see much stuff added to it after this point in time. Which kind of brings me to Crest, and this is where the meat of my presentation, I think, will be. But before I really start talking about Crest, I want to talk to you guys a little bit about the Eve server and the way we do certain things on the Eve server, because I think it'll help make a little bit more sense. We announced Crest quite a few years ago. We said we'd be getting it to you pretty soon, and that clearly didn't happen. But we never really said why that wasn't happening and the problem we ran into. And I figured now would be a good time to run you guys through what that problem was. And just, I think it's an interesting piece of information to know. So first, for those that aren't really aware, this is generally how the Eve Tranquility cluster is laid out, right? We have, in the very center, our SQL server. Connected to that, we have what we call our soul nodes. This is where most of the actual gameplay logic lives. This is where your character or the market or the in-space physics simulation runs, all that sort of stuff tends to run on the Sol nodes. And then on top of that, we have what we call our proxy nodes. And when your client connects to Tranquility, you make a connection to one of the proxy nodes based off of where our load balancer puts you. And then from there, depending what information you need or what you need to do, the Sol node sort of, the proxy directs your request to the appropriate node. So if you're talking to the market, it'll send you over to this node, and if you're talking to the in-space simulation, over to this node. And this is important for this discussion because what I want to talk to you guys about is sessions in Eve and the way that this affects Crest. So Crest lives on the proxy servers there. It's just a very simple HTTP server, simple. And the general idea is that because it lives on the proxies, it can talk directly to the Sol nodes and do the same kind of thing that the client would do in terms of all the gameplay logic, right? It can ask the same questions and get the same kind of responses a client would, format it for JSON, and return it out to your to whoever's asking for it. Now, when you make a connection like this with the Eve client, it's really important to remember that, one, this has been around since before 2003, this setup, and we've always assumed that there's one client connecting. Right? One client and one session per character. What that means is, when we send information back, we send it back to, we assume there's one session, so we can always send it to one session, right? We don't have to try and figure out which session does this information go to. We've never had to care about that. What the session also does for us, though, what the session also does for us, though, is store certain information such as your character ID, your corp ID, your corp role, all this sort of stuff. And the idea there is that when you make a call to edit a corp member, right, and you want to edit the roles he has, we don't have to do a DB dip to find out if you have the roles to make that change. We just check the session, right? And that if your roles change, we update the session and we update the DB. If you have a session. If you don't have a session, we don't update it because it doesn't exist. Now with Crest, and when we built Crest with Dust, we only had one session. You may have had a Crest session, but because you were a Dust client, you didn't have a regular Eve session and a Crest session. Now this gets a little bit trickier because when you start a session, assuming that there's only one client and it's the Eve client, we start up certain things. Like when a session's created, we log you into chat. We used to log you into space automatically. So before some changes happened, what used to happen is if you made a Crest call, because when you made an authenticated Crest call and we created a session, we logged you into space. So you could check your mail and your Titan would log in. Not so great. We fixed that, but there's still these other issues where you'll show up in chat and you'll show up as online to people that have you in their watch list, all that kind of stuff. What we realized recently, though, I'm not sure if you guys saw yesterday at the keynote, the statistics data that we started releasing. We realized we wanted to do that a few weeks ago, and we decided, well, we'd really rather put it into Crest than the XML API. How can we do that? Well, because the only bit of authentication we need is your character ID. We don't care about your corporal. This is just your personal information. The character ID is embedded in the token that you supply in a Crest call. So we can pull the character ID out of that, and then from the proxy, call the Sol node, and ourselves tell the Sol node, this is the character we want this information for, instead of the Sol node saying, this session, what character does this session belong to, and pulling the information that's appropriate there. Is this making sense? Yes? No? Yeah? Okay, sweet. That's a little bit different, so the question was, how do API keys fit into this? And they don't at all, because the XML API lives outside of the Tranquility cluster. The XML API, those boxes have direct access to the database, and they read-only access. So they pull from the community database where the API keys are stored, and if you have authentication, like if you're approved, we do the read to the database.
So this means that the Crest data for the player's statistics isn't going to be available to people who have an API key.
it's all, so the character statistics won't be made available in the XML API only because that's our choice. It all lives in the Tranquility database, which is what the XML API has direct read access to. We're just choosing to begin moving forward with Crest rather than continue moving forward with the XML API. We'd like to see people start transitioning over to Crest. If it becomes a big request, if people really, really want the character statistics in the XML API, we can do it. I'd rather not, but it's possible.
Well, the reason I ask is because you can give somebody an API key, which gives them essentially a token for you to get that data. So otherwise, it's just tied to my character name, my password. I'm the only person who can look at it.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're aware.
Not directly true. When you've logged into a site and you're requesting a scope, you'll get a refresh token.
Yeah, but so now I know what he's going on about, and I'll sort of get to that in a bit. Anyways, I'm glad that's making sense. So again, what we realized recently was that we could just pull the character ID from the token that's provided in Crest and make that request from the proxy of the Sol node sort of on your behalf instead of you doing it yourself. So this means we're not starting up a full-blown session. We're not logging you into space. We're not logging you into chat. We're not doing a lot of these other things. And when we did this, we're like, yay, it works. This is wonderful. I showed a few people at the office, and they're like, someone, I think it was Tuxford. It was either Tuxford or Seagull. At which point they said, so if you can do it there, why can't we do it for other things like mail or contacts? At which point I kind of had to go and say, I don't know. After doing a bit of research, it turns out we can do that. So what's coming very soon to Sissy, I don't know if we'll go to Tranquility with it, we have a lot of testing to do, is contacts, mail, and fittings to the Crest API on Sissy. We are still a little afraid to go to TQ with this because we need to do a fair bit of testing on it and make sure that the server doesn't die under some weird kind of load. But yeah, we will be releasing read access only for now to the contacts, mail, and I'll be quickly writing up a fittings resource there so you can get your fittings from the client. Saved fittings. Sorry. Yes, to saved fittings, not your active ships. I don't know how I would do that, but yeah, saved fittings. That would be cool. Dang it. Anyways, yeah. So the key thing with these, though, is that on the server side, these things only require your character ID. There's a lot of services in Eve that are broken down into character and corporation versions. And then there are some services that do both a corporation and character thing. So mail and contacts, for example, only require your character ID, but then there's certain other things that even though you only want your personal assets, do require that call would require a corporation key or a corporation ID. So we won't be doing things like that just yet, but other services that only require your character ID are things we'll be looking at exposing. If you have any suggestions, if there's anything you really want to see in Crest that is your character level thing, let me know. I'll look to see if I can get it exposed. If I can, it shouldn't take too much work, and we can get it on Sissy and start seeing what it does to the Sissy server. If it doesn't explode the Sissy server, we'll look at getting it on TQ. That requires a session. That absolutely requires a session, unfortunately. I looked, trust me. I looked at skills and I looked at skill queue. I'll see if I can fix it, but yes. So that's kind of Crest and what we've done over the last, or I guess sort of what's coming up with Crest, which hopefully should make you guys happy to see. The next thing I want to talk to you about is documentation. And again, the slide's blank. I was a little bit sick. So we tried doing documentation on the developer site. And so actually backing up a little bit, the history of documentation for Eve and CCP has generally been, there is no documentation. We have no documentation. Pardon? Yeah, much like the slide, yeah. So, okay, there was no documentation. Third-party devs tended to create some amazing documentation on some wikis. But people wanted to know where to go and get it. People didn't necessarily know where they could go and get documentation. And we didn't really want to link to it because it wasn't our documentation. Like, we weren't in control of it. We couldn't, confirm its authenticity, things like that. But but we also weren't willing to put in the effort, so we kind of were in this middle ground of nothing. And then we launched the developer site, and we decided to see if we could get some proper documentation out. And this was wonderful. It was a great idea. It was a great experiment. But what we've realized is I'm terrible at writing documentation, and I generally don't have time to do it. I have time to write little bits of it here and there, but not enough time to write everything that's necessary. So what I started doing a little while ago as an experiment was putting the documentation on GitHub. I decided to see how it would look if I put it on GitHub, and I put it, and I set up a, has anyone used readthedocs.org, I think they are, readthedocs.org or something like that? Yeah, so for anyone that's not used it, it's a website that'll auto-generate documentation using Sphinx, and it makes it look really pretty. They'll host it for you, it's wonderful, all that kind of stuff. So I started doing a bit of experimentation to see if I could do it in Markdown, because I thought Markdown would be easy enough for most people to jump into and use without having to learn RST, restructured text or whatever it's called, to see if it would look good enough and whatnot. And what I found is I'm hoping that this kind of, it's something I want to try. I want to see if you guys are interested in trying it, because again, it's not something, the documentation is not something I can do alone. But what this would allow, and the big difference between this and previous versions of the documentation, is this, because it's a Git repo, you guys can supply pull requests, and then I or others at CCP are in charge of approving and merging the pull request, which means we can confirm the authenticity of it, we're happy with it, and we're happy to link to it and say that this is sort of the official documentation. But it's also the collaborative nature that we have of wikis that was working great for you guys before. So I'm hoping that this will be a great middle ground we can try. If anyone has any suggestions on this thing, as I said, this has been an experiment that I was just trying the last couple of weeks. I'm going to keep trying. If anyone has any suggestions for it or comments or anything like that, I'd be more than happy to talk about it. Pardon? Yeah, go to my GitHub, github.com/Reiner, R-E-G-N-E-R. I'll put a link on the Tech Lab forums and whatnot to it. As I said, I should have put a link in here, but I didn't think people would want to copy it down. So I was just going to put it on the Tech Lab forums and on Twitter and whatnot to see how that goes. So the next thing I want to talk about, and before I switch to it, I want to preface this with a gargantuan, please don't jump to conclusions until I'm done talking. Please, dear God, please. So there's been talk a long time about CCP doing one of those, and we're still not. We're still not, just to be clear. So we have great mobile apps from people like Marcel, Aura, and EveDroid, and there's the Neocom on iOS and whatnot. So there's been, over the last couple of weeks, month or so, maybe 2 months, there's been people at the office poking me. They're like, well, can you tell me more about Crest? I want to learn Crest to make, and I want to learn to make a mobile app, so I thought I'd use Crest. And I've had like 3 different people talk to me about it. They all individually wanted to make a mobile app using Crest just to learn making a mobile app. And then, so in talking to them and some players and whatnot, pardon? Oh, sorry, I thought someone said something. An idea was born that, again, is a bit of an experimentation like the documentation on GitHub. The idea is we'd like to start with you guys, seeing if we can build a mobile app together on GitHub kind of thing. There's been a big concern from a lot of people that they're not willing to put login through the SSO on their phone through a third-party app. They want something official from CCP, that kind of thing, and a lot of other concerns. So anyways, the gist of it is basically just that we'd like to maybe try this, experiment with it. If anyone has any experience with it, I'd love to sit down and chat with you, if you have experience making Android or iOS apps and doing it collaboratively on GitHub, that kind of thing. I'd love to sit down and chat with you. This is, as I said, literally just an idea that we wanted to float and run past some people. I figured this would be a great spot to do it. I figured if I brought it up now, we can talk about it for the rest of Fanfest. And yeah, the one last thing I wanted to mention, again, sort of on GitHub, is that if you watch the CCP Games GitHub, you will have noticed we've started putting more stuff on there, especially our engine team. The CCP Webgl project is there and being updated, but there's also 2 other projects from them. One for controlling the client-side cache for download on demand. They're very enthusiastic about putting this stuff up on GitHub. So if you want to look at that, experiment with it, please do. Please provide bugs there, pull requests, be patient. The guys doing it are not used to GitHub or Git or that kind of thing. So be patient with them, help them, and let's start doing some more of this stuff together. Anyways, that's kind of the end of my presentation. Very quick one. But if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer anyone's questions. So we'll already answered some of your questions. We'll go up to this guy back there.
When you guys first started talking about the two-factor authentication at the keynote, the first thing that pretty much came to my mind was how Blizzard did it with their physical authenticator that they mailed to people. And I started thinking about if you guys had any plans to have any type of physical authentication. Like Microsoft sends a text to your phone, so you physically have to enter that code to get your account.
So sorry, the question was kind of, do we have any plans of sending a text message or something a little bit more physical? Yeah. So have you used the Google Authenticator?
Well, I used the StarCraft one and the Blizzard one. That's the physical.
Yeah. For those that aren't aware, the way the Google Authenticator works is you download and install an app on your phone, and you will need the number that app generates. So you will have to have your phone on you or access to your email. The second choice is to have us send you an email with the code. So you will have to have access to your email or the app. It's what we have planned. I don't know of any plans beyond that.
My whole thing is like, if I log into a third-party site, I put my email in, I put my password in, somebody takes my email, someone takes my password, then they find a way to get my actual email password. I don't have anything physical.
So, first of all, you shouldn't have to give them your email necessarily. To log into the SSO, you only need to use your username and password. On top of that, the authentication there is done on our site, not theirs. So when you click log in with Eve on someone's site, you're redirected to our website. And you can confirm that in the address bar, check, that it's HTTPS, and you can click, depending what browser you're on, the lock or the green button at the top left there, and confirm it's our website. So third-party devs should never see your account name. One of the things we've been very careful about is to ensure that when you log into a third-party website, they get a single character, and they have no way of linking that character to other characters on the account or to the account name or anything like that. So hopefully that helps alleviate some of your fears. Sweet. Other questions? Cool. You had a question, sir?
Yeah. What are CCP or your thoughts on write access regarding Crest API?
So once we're done these tests, which is the read access only, we'll start looking at the write access. We want to get it out as soon as possible, but we're trying very hard not to make promises we can't keep. So my promise right now is that we're going to get this stuff on Sissy as soon as possible, and beyond that, we'll see where it goes. But we really, really want to get write access out. Sorry, can you guys continue that conversation later? Thanks.
So let me give you my application for the player character information where I want somebody like a corporation to have access to it. Like what if you wanted to give achievements and they were like Logi achievements where your Logi has repped, I don't know, 1 million hit points during battle. Right now, like what would be the workflow since we can only get the data through Crest? How can the corporation give a badge to somebody for exceptional logistics?
Yeah. So the question was, what would the flow be if a corporation wanted to give awards out based on the statistics, right? And sort of what I guess more importantly, what's the difference in the flow between the XML API and Crest? So let's start with the XML API. In the XML API, you'd have to go and generate an API key, right? probably select just the statistics or maybe everything, whatever. Then give that API key to the corporation website where they'd process it and get your stats, right? Versus Crest, where you just go to their website, you log in with your Eve account, and then they ask for the statistics scope. So when you're logging in, it says, this is the scopes they want. You say, yes, I approve, and then they have it. So this actually makes it simpler. You don't have to go to our website, then their website. You just go to their website, log in, approve the scopes they want, and away you go.
On that same thing, though, does that not mean that using Crest, it always has to be someone initiating that for their own account again? So with API, you can just continuously pull their data once they give you permission once.
So the question is, with the XML API, once you have the API key, you can continuously refresh the information. How do you do that with Crest, basically? Or does a user have to keep logging into the website? No, a user does not. When a user logs into your website and you've requested scopes from them, you'll get what's known as a refresh token. So it's standard OAuth 2. I'd recommend looking it up. But basically, when they log in, you get a refresh token and an authorization token. The authorization token's good for 15 minutes, I think, something. It's good for a certain number of minutes. Once that expires, you use the refresh token to get a new authorization token. They're unlimited. So that's exactly what I was then going to say. Players can go to the community website, same kind of area where they would generate an API key. There's another link, I can't remember what it's called. It's right below the API keys link, in which it'll list every application that they've ever signed into and let them revoke access.
I have an API credentials for the Crest API for login generated by you before the developer's website went online.
Yep.
And users were reporting they can't revoke it.
Well.
The later appearing menu.
Okay. Can you poke me after this and we'll sort that out?
Okay.
Perfect. Thanks. Any other questions? Sorry. Thank you.
Yeah, that's all right. I always spoke about it, and there was a suggestion of a forum post a while back, but I don't know if anything came of it or not. But being able to generate XML API keys through Crest somehow for all the endpoints that I use pretty much all of them.
Yeah.
And an alliance capability to pull data down for pilots. Just a lot of that functionality is not there for Crest.
Yep.
And it's, I'd really love to use the SSO.
Yep.
But it means that I'd have to use the SSO and then get people to generate an API key, and then we'll come back and put that in before I let them access to certain things.
Yep.
And it would be really nice, even if it was just a temporary thing until we
Yep.
if we could maybe add it as a scope that we can pull over.
Yeah. So the question was, are we still looking at allowing the generation of XML API keys through Crest? And we looked at it. We ran into a few difficulties with it, and then, to be honest, got a little bit distracted with some of this other stuff. I can't exactly remember what the difficulties were. I'll double check that and see where we're at and what would be required for it, and sort of get back to you on the forums. I know it would definitely be a really nice thing. Yeah, so I'll get back to you. Yeah, not a problem. Sweet. Any other questions? Yes.
There's actually a couple of things.
Yeah.
Really question, but the Crest endpoints. There's the alliance list there, and there's corporation and character list.
Yep.
Endpoints in the thing, which haven't actually been implemented or released. I'm wondering if they're on the horizon.
The character one's on Sissy right now. The corporation one, we have no plans at this point in time. Again, because we've always only had one client, we've had a lot of assumptions on that. We're a little worried about memory usage on certain parts of our cluster. If people start looking at every alliance, every corporation, every character, that kind of thing. So the characters thing is live on Sissy now. We'll see if it goes to TQ. I was going to announce that a little bit later. But yeah, if you guys can start, you do need, it's not available on public Crest, but it is available on AuthCrest, and you can browse sort of every character. Pardon? It's any scope. Any scope. Yeah.
And the other thing is that the challenge you found with no graph,
Mm-hmm.
with no graph.
Yep.
Because I actually did that. I found it was really fun. Especially I've never done JavaScript before.
Sorry, who are you?
Also,
Yeah, okay.
you know me a bit, by the way.
I do owe you a bit.
I just want to say I thought that was a really great idea, and be happy to have a go at other ones in
Cool.
the future if you have similar ideas.
I will keep that in mind. I'm glad you enjoyed that. So out of curiosity, did anyone see that? Who here saw that forum post of mine about looking for some help?
I saw it just on.
Just a couple. Okay. So who here knows about the developer site and the RSS feed there? Okay. Developers.com, developers.eveonline.com. Good site. So for those that weren't sort of aware, I made a forum post that said we're looking for a bit of help. We're looking not necessarily for help, but we're looking to give some people early access to a Crest resource. What I don't want is people to feel that we're being unfair and only giving it to a few people. So if anyone has a suggestion on how best to tell you all when we have that kind of thing coming up, I'd love to know. I made a forum post, but I mean, clearly not everyone saw it. If there's a better way for me to do that kind of thing, please let me know. The launcher? The RSS feed? Yeah. All right, cool. Anyway, sorry, someone else had a question there.
Is there a little chance to get the JavaScript engine in the Indian browser updated?
Yeah, that one. So I'm basically waiting for a few more things to get fixed so that we can put your character's location in Crest. And once we can do that, I'm killing that IGB. I know it's not a happy thing. A lot of people use it. The location is kind of the biggest thing, the most used header that the IGB offers. There's some other things that the IGB does, such as click the pop-ups, that kind of stuff, not just the headers, the JavaScript things. Those are things we'll look at getting added to Crest at a later time. Those are things we could potentially do, right? We could have it so you click a link on a website and it shows the show info window in the client. That's possible. I don't know if that'll be done before we kill the IGB, but definitely we want to kill the IGB. It's not going to get updated before we kill it.
Killing is also good.
I'm glad you're not one of the people that wants to kill me.
So as far as that goes, are we going to have any form of enduring browser? I don't care about necessarily the headers or anything, but even beyond, just the fact that it does all that cool stuff, having a resource in the game that I don't have to alt-tab on one screen to be able to access things.
Unfortunately, no. We will set out. I assume. I don't know. I don't know if we've looked into it. But I assume we'll have links still work so they open your desktop, your default browser kind of thing. There are also other choices such as I think it's called Overwolf. It's an overlay software, so you can still have your desktop browsers are overlaid over top of the client. There's options like that. I know it doesn't cover every use case, and we're looking. I'm doing research. I'm trying to find other options. I don't want to pull the IGB away and not tell people about these other options. But unfortunately, I don't think we'll cover every use case.
And that is third-party browser? It's not possible? API for Firefox, Chrome, Internet Explorer, for example?
Sorry, can you repeat your question?
To embed
So questions about can we just embed a different browser? So most of these browsers advance at a very, very quick rate. Very, very, very quick, especially if you look at Chrome, Chromium, or whatever sort of version of Chrome you want to look at. And then when you start looking at things like Chrome, I can't remember what the open source version of Chrome is called, just like the engine there. But, pardon? Is it Chromium? Yeah, okay. It doesn't even have audio support or things like that, right? So even if we go with things like that these days, we're missing a lot of those other features. So not only do we have to maintain it, which we've clearly proven we're not very good at, unfortunately, we then have to add a bunch of other features and things like that. So it makes it very difficult for us. And we really want to focus on making EVE a great game. And every part of it that we do support, we want to be great. So, yep.
When the RGB will be thrown out, will the Crest actually contain all the info we get from headers now?
I mean, eventually, hopefully, Crest does like everything in the world. Before we remove the IGB, the most used and critical things from the IGB, the IGB headers, will be in Crest. That's what we're waiting on before we remove the IGB. Yeah. Yes, I'm fully aware. I live in a wormhole myself, and wormholers are the biggest, the most outspoken people whenever this topic gets brought up. And I'll say what I say, which is every time, which is we will not remove the IGB until we have that support in Crest. So yes, hopefully that makes you not so worried. Yep.
When you want to bring the in-game location to Crest for actually removing the in-game browser, will it be 15-minute cache time?
No. Most of the things on Crest these days are being cached fairly low, and things like that will be cached.
I'm speaking about minutes, I'm speaking about seconds, because usually when you use the in-game browser, you usually have some kind of refresh running in the background.
So what I'm hoping, we have a couple of options. One is having a really low cache time on it. The other option is having our notifications things sorted out on Crest. So Crest has support for long polling and that kind of thing. So what we need to do is fix a few things with the session issue, so we can do an actual proper session. And that fix basically means that when we create a session, don't automatically start all these things like chat and whatnot. And if we fix that, we can do a proper notification stream, which means that you'll get notified when the person changes system instead of having to continuously poll. If we fix that, otherwise we'll put it on a super low cache time and you can poll all we want. I know I don't. Trust me, I don't. I don't want that. But we'll, as I said, one of those two things will go. We need to replace the functionality of the locations header, and it being on a 5 minute or 1 hour timer isn't going to do it. That's not replacing that functionality. So, cool. Yep.
What about the functions in the other direction? So you can join chat channels.
Yeah. By the time we remove the IGB, those we probably won't have a replacement for those. We have some ideas on how to replace them. I mean, simply if we fix this session issue, getting chat in Crest. I mean, chat is there for Dust, right? If we fix this session issue, it can be there for Eve. And if that's there, you can join chat channels all you want and things like that. And then there's other parts of it, like opening up a certain contract or a show info window and that kind of stuff, which we can add that functionality to Crest at a later time. Still working on that. Cool. Yeah.
Is there going to be any kind of visual indicator that somebody is chatting via Crest instead of in-game?
We haven't decided. That's a big topic whenever this gets brought up. There's some people that, I mean, we need to do something when someone's only in via Crest. You can't invite them to a fleet and things like that. But then there's certain beliefs that we shouldn't say when you're outside the client or inside the client. So it's an ongoing discussion.
And that makes ISK spammers, like, they don't even have to log into the game. They can just bot it.
To be
That's a negative.
yes, and we're aware, and it's something we will work on solving. I mean, to be fair, if they start spamming the same thing via Crest that they do through a macro in the client, it's even easier for us to detect. Probably. I don't really know. Haven't thought about it too much. Cool. Any other? Yeah, sweet.
Is there any roadmap in regards to the upcoming FoxFour?
So one of the really cool things, especially about Crest, is because Crest runs on the proxies and it's all in Python, which is what all of our gameplay programmers use. And we have enough knowledge on the Eve teams now about how to write Crest exposures that I think they're getting more confident about doing it. So I can't remember his name. What's Jamie's dev name? Yeah. Masterplan. Excuse me, Masterplan. I believe has hopes. I don't know if it'll actually happen. Has hopes of getting some of that stuff in Crest. So there's a discussion going. No promises to be made yet, but I believe Fozzie even talked about it yesterday in his presentation about their desire to get this information out to third-party devs. So not only is there a discussion about this kind of stuff going on, which is a far cry from what we used to have, which is wonderful. It's the teams are getting the capability to do it themselves. So all in all, we're in a good place there, and hopefully, yes. Yeah.
I was wondering if kill mails are something that can be done with just your character ID and getting a list. Why not have those
It's a good point.
I was also kind of wondering if anything's got further on the idea of exposing all kill mails publicly.
We had that discussion last year, and we were very close to doing it, and there were some points brought up that made us decide not to, and we haven't come back to we haven't had the discussion again yet, unfortunately. So if there, I'm not sure what will spark us into having that conversation again, and what will change in actually making us do it, but at this point, no.
Those problems, because at Fanfest last year, you guys were like, this is coming, basically.
No, we weren't.
You've all been said, you're like, they have 99% of them anyway.
Yeah.
They're doing nothing.
Yeah, and that's what I said. And during that roundtable and after it, there was the main points that made us not do it was basically there are some people that actually game it, that play it right, that even pay people not to post their kill mails or their the kill of I lost my ship. I'll pay you not to post the kill mail. I don't want that fit known, that kind of thing, right? So it's a very, very small percentage of people, but it's very. We found the idea of that very interesting, and we didn't want to remove it, especially when the 94, 95% of the kill mails are already there. We wouldn't be changing much except ruining these people's. Even though it's a small amount, we'd be ruining it for not much gain.
As of right now, we basically got a third-party data broker in Zkill and EveKill, and when they split, all of a sudden we had a bunch of tools that broke,
Yeah.
and data gets inconsistent.
Yeah.
Maybe if we just had we can flag publicly if CCP is just the broker, so at least we have some consistency and knowing, and we all know, hey, we all send, if we want our public stuff, and which most of us are, we want our kill boards public.
Yeah.
Then at least that lets us build better tools. Because right now I've got no motivation to build an in-house Zkill front end, basically.
Yep.
Because I have no idea if Zkill is going to be around, and then I'm going to be changing APIs, and then I'm going to be doing all sorts of stuff to keep it up.
Yep. So if we were to make everything public, I think we'd have to do the feature where you can flag. I don't want these I don't want this one public, or I don't want any of my kill mails public. We'd have to add that feature. I don't think that's very high on our priority list for the feature teams, and so I don't know when we'll get around to doing that. So, unfortunately. Sorry. Cool. Anything else? Got time for a couple more questions if anyone has them? No? Cool. There's people sitting on the stairs. There's plenty of seats. Okay. Cool. Thank you very much, guys. Hopefully it wasn't too much of a waste of your time.